The day of the wedding dawned clear and golden, sunlight spilling over the rolling lawns of Brooke Logan's estate, where white tents and cascading floral arrangements transformed the gardens into a vision of perfection. Hope Logan stood before her mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the lace veil pinned into her hair. This was the moment she had fought toward, the moment where all the chaos of her past, the betrayals, the broken promises, the lingering shadows of Thomas Forrester, and the endless back and forth with Liam Spencer, would finally resolve into something steady and real. For years, she had dreamed of this peace, this sense of completion. The air itself felt hushed with expectation, and in the next room, she could hear Beth giggling as she rehearsed her role as the mini officiant, taking her job far more seriously than anyone could have expected. The laughter was grounding, a reminder that, despite all the turmoil that had defined their lives, something pure and good had come out of it all. Outside, guests gathered in clusters, the Forresters, the Spencers, the Logans, all mingling beneath strings of white lights that glittered like stars against the pale morning sky. Ridge and Brooke exchanged soft smiles, relieved to see at least one of their family's endless love stories reaching a moment of grace. Steffi stood with Finn near the fountain, their own hands entwined, their shared losses and reconciliations lending a quiet empathy to the celebration. And somewhere among them all, Will Spencer lingered near the bar, older now, sharper around the edges, but still carrying the ghost of something unspoken, the memory of Luna Nozawa, the woman whose death had once fractured so many hearts. It was strange how the past could feel both distant and immediate. The name Luna hadn't been spoken openly in months, but her absence lingered like a perfume that refused to fade. For Will, her face would always exist in the space between regret and longing, a memory tainted by what-ifs and near misses. There had been talk of her, quiet gossip that refused to die, the plane crash, the tragedy, the mystery that surrounded her final days. Some said she had secrets, others that she had enemies. But no one ever imagined that, on this day of all days, the name Luna would once again be spoken aloud, or that it would unravel everything the wedding was supposed to stand for. As the ceremony began, Hope and Liam stood under an arch woven with white roses, the sunlight catching on her dress and setting it aglow like spun glass. Beth stood proudly between them, her little voice steady as she began to read the vows she had practiced. There was laughter, tears, the tender murmur of vows whispered through emotion. The world seemed suspended in that fragile, perfect stillness that comes right before fate decides to move again. And then, without warning, it did. A sudden stir rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, whispers rose like wind in tall grass. Down the long aisle leading to the altar, a woman appeared, her figure slim, her dress simple but elegant, her face partially obscured by the wide brim of a hat. In her arms, she carried a small child wrapped in a soft white blanket. At first, it was confusion, perhaps an unexpected guest, a lost visitor. But as she moved closer, the light fell across her face, and the reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Brooke clutched Ridge's arm. Steffi's eyes widened. And Will went rigid, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering unnoticed at his feet. Because the woman walking toward them looked exactly like Luna Nozawa. For a moment, no one breathed. Hope's hand found Liam's instinctively, her heart pounding. The resemblance was uncanny. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same delicate jawline, the same quiet intensity that had once made Luna impossible to ignore. But there was something colder here, sharper, a composure that Luna had never possessed. When the woman finally spoke, her voice carried clearly over the stunned silence, smooth and deliberate. "My name is Lina Nozawa," she said, pausing long enough for the name to sink in. "I am Luna's twin sister." The words hit like a tremor. A twin? Impossible. Luna had never mentioned family beyond Poppy. And yet, here this woman stood, a living echo of her. Lena stepped forward, the child in her arms stirring slightly. "I didn't come to disrupt your celebration," she continued, though her tone suggested that disruption was exactly what she expected to cause. But I couldn't stay silent any longer. My sister's story was never told in full, and neither was mine. Finn was the first to find his voice. You're saying Luna had a twin? Why didn't anyone know about you? Lena's gaze flickered toward him, calm but haunted. Because we were separated at birth. Our mother made a choice. One of us would stay, one would go. Luna was raised in the light. I wasn't. Her eyes shifted to Will then, holding his with unnerving steadiness. And I believe some of you here owe me and this child an explanation. Will's breath caught. He couldn't look away. The child, now awake, turned its face toward the crowd, and in that instant, Will's world tilted. The baby had Luna's eyes. Those wide, dark, searching eyes that had once looked at him with forgiveness after every mistake. He stepped forward slowly, his voice unsteady. What are you saying? He asked. Lena adjusted her grip on the baby, her movements deliberate. I'm saying that Luna left something behind. Something that belongs to her, and to the man who loved her. The murmur that followed was chaos restrained only by disbelief. Brooke pressed a hand to her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God," while Steffi turned toward Finn, her mind racing. Hope felt the blood drain from her face. It wasn't just the drama. It was the eerie feeling that something sacred had been interrupted, as if Luna's ghost had reached across the veil to reclaim what had been left unfinished. Will shook his head, backing away slightly. That's not possible, he said, but the words rang hollow even to his own ears. His heart was pounding, his thoughts racing back to those weeks before Luna's death. The secrecy, the sudden distance, the cryptic messages she'd sent him about something he needed to know but wasn't ready to hear. He had ignored them, afraid to confront what they meant. And now, standing here, faced with a mirror image of her holding a child who might be his, the guilt hit him with suffocating force. Lena's expression softened, but there was steel behind her grief. I didn't come here to accuse, she said. But I need the truth. My sister died without justice, and my nephew deserves to know who he is. The records were erased. The hospital reports were falsified. Someone wanted to bury what really happened to Luna. Her gaze swept the crowd, landing briefly on Finn, then on Steffi, before returning to Hope and Liam. And I think some of you already suspect that her death wasn't what it seemed. A chill swept through the gathering. It was as if the beautiful day had turned suddenly gray. Ridge stepped forward, his voice controlled but cold. You can't just walk into my daughter's wedding and make accusations like this. Lena's reply was calm. I didn't come to make accusations. I came to show you the truth. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag and handed it to Ridge. His brow furrowed as he read it, an autopsy report marked confidential, dated weeks after Luna's supposed death. The report indicated inconsistencies in the cause of death, suggesting the possibility that the explosion that killed her had been staged, or that someone had tampered with the investigation. Steffi's eyes darted to Finn. You were on that case, she whispered. Finn nodded slowly, his stomach twisting. I was. But I never saw this version of the report. He looked up at Lena. Where did you get this? She met his gaze without hesitation. From someone who wanted the truth to come out, someone inside the system who owed Luna a debt. The tension was suffocating. Hope, trying to steady her breath, looked from the paper to the child and back to Lena. If what you're saying is true, why now? Why here? Lena's lips curved in something between a smile and a wound. Because Luna deserves to be remembered for who she was, not for what people assumed. And because this child deserves his name before the world forgets his mother entirely. The baby whimpered then, a small, human sound that sliced through the atmosphere like a cry for mercy. Lena soothed him gently, her voice softening. I named him Lucian, she said. After her. Will felt something inside him break. The enormity of it all, the possibility that he had a son, that Luna might have lived long enough to bring this child into the world, shattered the fragile order he had tried to rebuild. He stumbled forward, reaching out instinctively, but Lena stepped back, wary. Not yet, she said quietly. Not until I know who I can trust. The ceremony was forgotten. Guests began to disperse in uneasy whispers, the air thick with speculation and fear. The press would pick it up within the hour. Mystery woman interrupts Forrester wedding, claims Tio be Luna Nozawa's twin. Brooke turned to Ridge, her voice trembling. If this is true, if Luna's death was covered up, who would do something like that? Ridge didn't answer, but his eyes were already dark with suspicion. As evening fell, the once celebratory garden was silent. Hope and Liam sat together under the now faded arch of flowers, their wedding vows unfinished, their joy replaced by uncertainty. She looked exactly like Luna, Hope whispered. Liam nodded, his jaw tight. And that baby Hope, what if Will really is the father? What if everything we thought we knew was a lie? Across the city, Lena stood in a small rented apartment, rocking Lucian to sleep. The lights were dim, the only sound the soft rhythm of his breathing. She stared out the window at the skyline, her reflection merging with the city lights. She had told the truth, but not all of it. There were still things she couldn't reveal, not yet. Luna's death, her disappearance, the reason Lena had been forced into hiding for years, all of it was part of something larger, darker. But tonight, she had taken the first step. She had returned not just to claim her sister's legacy, but to confront the people who had let her die. And somewhere, in the quiet heart of Los Angeles, a man watched the breaking news report on his television, his expression unreadable. The headline flashed, Lena Nozawa returns, secrets of Luna's death exposed. He switched off the screen, poured himself a drink and murmured, "Welcome back, Lena. You've started a war you can't win." What had begun as a wedding, a celebration of love and redemption, had become the opening act of a new reckoning. Hope's white gown was still hanging by the door, untouched, a ghost of a future that might never arrive. In its place, questions hung heavier than vows, and the memory of Luna Nozawa, now split between the living and the dead, rose again to haunt every life she had ever touched. The morning light shimmered over the Forrester estate, gilding every petal, every glass flute, and every carefully arranged ribbon in soft gold. Hope Logan stood at the center of it all, radiant, calm, believing for once that her life had finally come full circle. The past was behind her, the heartbreaks, the scandals, the fractured trust. Today was about peace. She had forgiven Liam Spencer, and he, in turn, had promised her stability, the kind of love that no longer required fighting. Their daughter Beth danced among the guests, twirling in her small white dress, proudly reminding everyone she would be the one to marry Mommy and Daddy again. The laughter was pure, the air full of joy. No one knew that, in the shadows of this perfect celebration, Sheila Carter was waiting, the venom of her anger distilled into a plan so cruel it could only have been born from obsession. Sheila had watched from afar for months, her rage festering. To her, Hope and Liam's wedding wasn't a reunion, it was an insult. She had given Deacon Sharp, Hope's father, a piece of her heart, or at least what passed for one, and she had been dismissed, mocked, left out. Brooke had forbidden her name to even be spoken at the ceremony. Hope's message through intermediaries had been clear, "You are not welcome here." To Sheila, it was unforgivable. She had clawed her way back from death, survived rejection, and endured every insult this town could hurl at her. And now they wanted to erase her again, as if she were nothing. She smiled bitterly in the mirror of her hotel room, the reflection of her blood-red lipstick twisting upward. "You want perfection," she whispered to herself, "then I'll give you something unforgettable." Her plan had taken weeks to perfect, a symphony of deceit orchestrated with surgical precision. Somewhere in a dimly lit apartment in the industrial outskirts of Los Angeles, Sheila had found the perfect accomplice, a woman named Lena, a struggling actress with Luna Nozawa's same delicate features, the same long dark hair, the same haunted eyes. All she needed was the right story. Sheila promised her a fortune and a fabricated destiny. She spun lies about Luna being her twin, about a child born in secrecy, about injustice and betrayal. The more fantastical the tale, the more Lena seemed to believe it. But Sheila didn't just rely on chance resemblance. She ensured perfection. Makeup, wardrobe, even a discreet cosmetic touch-up. By the time Sheila was done, Lena wasn't merely similar to Luna, she was Luna reborn. The final piece was the child. Sheila found a baby through a woman desperate to pay off debt, a surrogate from another scandal buried in the city's darker corners. She paid her handsomely and took the infant into her care, dressing him in soft blue and naming him Lucian. The plan was simple. During the wedding, Lena would appear carrying the child, claiming to be Luna's long-lost twin. She would name Will Spencer as the father and accuse the Forresters and Spencers of covering up Luna's survival and her baby's existence. Sheila knew what the revelation would do. Chaos, confusion, humiliation. The perfect ruin of Hope's fairy tale day. As the ceremony began, the gardens glowed with afternoon light. Ridge, Brooke, Steffi, Finn, and the rest of the Forrester clan watched proudly as Hope walked down the aisle toward Liam. The music swelled, a soft blend of strings and sentiment, and for a moment, it felt as if peace had truly settled over them. Deacon, seated near the front, dabbed at his eyes. He had never been prouder of his daughter. He had chosen not to tell her that Sheila had called him the night before, slurring, furious, threatening to make the world remember her name. He had assumed it was another of her empty tantrums. But even as he smiled through the ceremony, a cold unease coiled in his stomach. Then, at the moment when Beth raised her small hand to begin the vows, the air shifted. A murmur rippled through the guests as a woman appeared at the far end of the aisle. Her steps were slow, deliberate, almost regal. The child in her arms stirred, his soft cries piercing the hush. At first, no one understood. Perhaps an uninvited relative, a guest who had arrived late. But as she moved closer, faces paled. The resemblance was undeniable. Luna Nozawa, the young woman whose death had rocked Los Angeles, was walking toward them, alive, holding a baby. Hope froze, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "Luna," she whispered under her breath. Liam turned, disbelief etched across his face. Brooke's hand went to her heart. Finn and Steffi exchanged horrified glances. And Will, standing near the back, felt the world tilt beneath him. The woman reached the altar, her gaze sweeping over the stunned crowd. When she spoke, her voice was low and steady, every word calculated. "My name is Lena Nozawa," she said. "Luna was my twin. And this," she lifted the child slightly, her tone tightening, "is her son, the child of Will Spencer." The shock detonated like a bomb. The audience erupted into whispers, gasps, frantic denials. Hope staggered backward, her bouquet falling from her hands. Brooke clutched Ridge's arm, whispering, "This can't be happening." Will shook his head, pale and trembling, his eyes darting between Lena and the baby. "No," he said, voice breaking. "No, this is insane." Lena's expression didn't waver. "You think I came here to play games?" she asked, her tone cutting. "Luna died carrying this secret. She loved you, Will, and she paid for it with her life. But I won't let her child grow up denied of his name." The crowd was in chaos. Reporters who had been invited for publicity began filming. Ridge shouted for security, but it was too late. The moment had already been captured, immortalized. Sheila, watching from her car parked just beyond the gates, smiled in satisfaction. Every scream, every gasp, every tear was music to her ears. Inside, pandemonium consumed the wedding. Finn stepped forward, his doctor's calm fighting against disbelief. "Luna never mentioned a sister," he said carefully. "Poppy never said anything." Lena interrupted him sharply. "Because Poppy didn't know. I was taken from her as a baby. Our mother, she made choices that tore us apart. Luna got the good life. I got nothing. Until now." Hope's voice cracked as she stepped forward. "Why are you doing this here? Why today?" Lena met her eyes, unflinching. "Because this family hides everything under silk and perfume. Lies disguised as virtue. I wanted the truth to be seen where it would hurt most. in your perfect world. For a moment, the truth of that landed like a blow. Hope had lived her life trying to be the embodiment of morality, forgiveness, second chances. Now, standing in her wedding gown, she looked like a woman undone. Liam reached for her hand, but she didn't take it. The weight of everyone's eyes crushed her. Will pushed past the crowd, voice trembling. If this is true, he said, then prove it. Lena's gaze softened just enough to appear genuine. I already have DNA results. They're in my purse. She gestured to a small clutch. Steffi snatched it and opened the folded papers inside. Her face blanched as she read the words, probability of paternity, 99.97%. The silence that followed was absolute. Sheila laughed from her car, watching the live broadcast on her phone. The plan had worked even better than she'd hoped. Her enemies were tearing each other apart, and she didn't even need to fire a gun this time. But chaos has a way of slipping from its master's grip. Back at the estate, Finn's instincts kicked in. Something about the documents bothered him, the font, the formatting. He looked closer. These aren't from the hospital, he said sharply. They're fakes. Steffi blinked, confused. What? Finn held up the papers. I've seen real test results. These are forged. Someone's trying to play us. The crowd shifted again, panic turning into suspicion. Lena's mask began to crack. No, she said, her voice rising. They're real. Luna gave them to me before she. But Finn's gaze was laser-focused now, his voice sharp. You're not Luna's sister. You've had cosmetic work, subtle, but enough. I'm a doctor. I can tell. Who sent you? Lena hesitated, just a flicker, but enough. Her eyes darted toward the entrance, toward the distant shape of a black car idling beyond the gates. Finn followed her gaze. Sheila, he whispered. The name fell like poison. Brooke gasped. Ridge cursed under his breath. Hope staggered back, as if struck. Sheila Carter, of course it was her. The chaos, the lies, the manipulation, it all fit her signature. Where is she? Ridge barked. Security moved instantly, racing toward the gates. But by the time they reached the road, Sheila was gone, her laughter echoing in the distance. The car disappeared down the highway, its taillights fading into the dusk. Back inside, the damage was irreparable. The wedding was over. Hope sat alone at the altar, her veil crumpled in her lap, tears streaming silently down her face. Liam stood nearby, helpless, while Will stared at the baby, no longer sure what was real, what was fabrication, and what dark part of his past Sheila had managed to twist into new pain. In the days that followed, the scandal consumed every headline. Fake Luna crashes Forrester wedding. Sheila Carter suspected in new hoax. But for those who had been there, it wasn't just another soap tragedy. It was personal. It reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. Brooke blamed herself for ever allowing Deacon near Sheila. Ridge vowed to hunt her down. Finn, haunted by the near-perfection of the impersonation, wondered how close Lena's story had been to reality. And Hope, fragile, heartbroken, felt something darker than sorrow growing inside her. Rage. Because Sheila hadn't just ruined a wedding. She had destroyed innocence, trust, and peace. And somewhere deep within her, Hope realized that forgiveness, the thing she had built her life around, might finally have reached its end. As for Sheila, she sat in a dim motel room, sipping champagne, her lips curling in satisfaction. On the television, footage from the wedding played again and again. Hope's tear-streaked face, Liam's shock, Will's confusion. Beautiful, Sheila murmured. Absolutely beautiful. She turned off the screen, her reflection flickering in the dark glass. You wanted to forget me, she said softly. Now you never will. But even as she spoke, her eyes hardened. Because in the chaos she'd unleashed, one truth had begun to stir, a secret she hadn't meant to expose. Somewhere in Los Angeles, the real Luna's name had resurfaced in a database long thought deleted. And Sheila, for the first time in years, felt something unexpected: fear. The game she had started was far from over. It had only just